everyone. Today I'll be discussing the influential study on being sane in insane places. This experiment took place in 1973 by David Rosenhan, an American psychologist. He questioned the authority of psychiatrists at the time, as did many others in the 60s and 70s. The purpose was to test whether or not the hospital staff could. Rosenhan claimed that psychiatrists could not accurately tell the difference between sane and insane. Psychology has always been questioned in the medical field for reliability in diagnosis, and this was not an unpopular claim. This goes a bit further into behavioral psychology and diagnosing people based on their behaviors. In his experiments, there were 8 pseudopatients, or imposters. Most of the participants actually worked in the psych field, so it must have been very fascinating to take part in this experiment. So the pseudopatients made appointments at 12 hospitals claiming to hear voices and using words like empty, hollow, and thud when explaining the voices. These words were used specifically since they do not relate to any mental illnesses. The second part of the study was giving the hospital staff the task of figuring out which patients were faking it. In the results of the study, all but one were diagnosed with schizophrenia. In the reports of the participants, the staff were said to be abusive and would ignore the patients. The staff did not like to make eye contact and would claim the patients were insane for doing normal things, such as note-taking. In the task of distinguishing sane from insane, the hospital staff failed. None of the pseudopatients were identified. So, what is the importance? The study showed how harsh a diagnosis can be. The labels attached to a diagnosis are fatal in defining the purpose and the way the world and the psychiatrists see that person. The reliability and validity of psychiatrists' diagnoses were questioned further by society.
No way. No way.
Jean felt that ECT and the drugs were actually contributing to her depression, so she began secretly cutting back on her dosage against the advice of Hyroid staff. It was an act of rebellion with positive effects.
As I gradually cut down, I gradually got much, much better. All this drowsiness, depression, lack of interest, the less drugs I were on, the more that started lifting. The change was amazing. Without the drugs, I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be awake and alive. That was lovely. That was marvellous.
Jean's resistance to her psychiatrists was part of a wider phenomenon. To many patients, doctors now seemed over-reliant on pills, the new tools of their trade. They saw drugs being used as blunt instruments in a way that was out of step with the spirit of the time. Britain in the 60s was undergoing enormous social changes. There was a new freedom to break down barriers and challenge orthodoxy. The drive to close the asylums captured this rebellious mood. Mental hospitals were just another battleground in a power struggle with the establishment.
The original study produced much more research and study, just as the video showed, a patient rethinking her diagnosis. In 2001, Christopher Scribner reviewed the original study in modern-day hospitals to see if there has been any progress since 1973. In his results, he finds that the issue we are facing today is not false diagnosis as much, but getting treatment for real mental illnesses. Restrictions on medication and treatment are much more strict and make it hard for patients with real illnesses to receive care. The original study was further reviewed in 2004 by Lawrence Slater, who reviewed the study and claimed that psychiatrists pushed drugs on patients. This is a bit contradicting to the Scribner study. But a review was evaluated and peer critiqued, and Robert Spitzer, Scott Lilienfeld, and Michael Miller found the opposite, that medication was not being recommended. So far, those are the modern-day reviews of the original study, and it is amazing to see how far it has come since Rosenhan, and how much progress we have made in mental health care. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.